Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my podcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, played for 11 seasons with the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings, and he's also a man that lives what he calls a true grit lifestyle. And Tom, I was watching the NFL draft, and I noted that Jon Gruden, the NFL coach, also arises every morning at 3:30. They didn't go into detail whether he does a march and whether he lives the true grit lifestyle, but he likes to rise early and get things done. So I wonder, did you feel, not that you needed it, but did you like to hear that someone else is living the way that you live?
Well, and a very intelligent man, Jon Gruden is too, right? To get up there early. No, it's interesting. Yeah. You know, I follow a lot of motivational speakers too. And there's a guy by the name of Eric Thomas. He's actually a Detroit native. And a really interesting story. He'd been tomeless and everything. And it took him like 12 years to graduate from Michigan State. And he talks about that, getting up in the early in the morning too, you know, and how it's like a whole dismal thing. And he talks about all these successful people who part of their routine is getting up early in the morning. So I've known that about Gruden for a while. And I think he gets up. I think he does a lot of studying films at that time, right? Because his family's still asleep and everything. So, but yeah, that's pretty cool.
Well, that makes sense. You know, and you can, you know, you can always get so much done when you get up. I get up before my wife does, and you know, but you know, not like you, but you know, I get up somewhere between 10 to 6 and 6:30, and my wife doesn't come downstairs till 3 hours later, and I find I've done a lot from the time that and I also find I'm a person that hits the ground running. And I'm more kind of sluggish later in the day. So
same here, totally.
Yeah. So anyway, Tom, I want to start with two things. One, we heard over the weekend, John Scott, the former NHL player, former All-Star MVP, said that he's heard that training camps will start at June 1st. And, we've seen a lot of reports that just, feed into the idea that we don't have a firm plan in place, because you can't have, not with the virus still running around rampant really in some places. But I think there are plans in place, and it looks like they're going to go to NHL cities where the virus isn't as prominent, and they're going to try to create a biosphere, a safe zone for players. But the one thing that sort of came out that I'm a little concerned about is Bill Daly said that, one test or multiple positive tests won't necessarily end the season. Now, I don't have a problem with that, because I'm sure they're consulting medical experts, and neither you nor I are medical experts. But, I just wonder, it really does go beyond that. If you're going to get one positive test or multiple on a single team, that means you're opening the door, because, you can spread this when you're asymptomatic. Kind of what's your thoughts now as we sort of move closer to this idea that we're going to play some hockey without fans, but we're going to play hockey?
Well, it's interesting. Just off the heels of Mr. Daly making those comments, and I think you and I both feel the same way about Bill Daly. A ton of respect for him.
And for sure.
So, like you said, he's probably consulting all these specialists that we've never talked to. But I was watching they had the replays on NBC yesterday of Washington winning the Stanley Cup and St. Louis winning the Stanley Cup, and it's something you never really paid attention to before. But particularly Washington, after they won the cup, the guys are all jumping all over each other. They're hugging each other face to face, sweat and spit's going everywhere. This is after they've won the cup. And it starts making me think now, like, and after Bill made those comments, Mr. Daly, that if they had positive tests, it wouldn't necessarily stop the games. I go, wow. I'm trying to think, like, if I was a player and I know an opponent or my teammate is tested positive, and I know that that's the extreme win in the Stanley Cup and hugging each other, but still in a game, guys getting the scrums and everything. I just, I don't know how you feel as a player when somebody else is tested positive on a certain team. Now, that doesn't, maybe you don't know for sure anybody else on that team that is tested positive, but you just don't know that they have the virus either. So it's kind of an unnerving feeling as a player, I would think, going back into that scenario. But I guess, you know what? it's all about the testing, right? And if they feel like they're testing them often enough, I just don't. But to be honest with you, I don't understand all the things that Mr. Daly obviously does, but I get really uneasy feeling about playing games when you know the other people have tested positive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. And nervous, I think, is the right word. Like I'm excited about them reopening the season, and I look forward to even watching games without fans. I'm curious to see, when we've seen games before, we've seen international tournaments where there's if you're playing a World Junior Championship game in Austria or abroad or Finland, you're just not guaranteed to have a crowd depending on who your opponent is. But saying all that, I'm just a little bit concerned. Like even a little thing, like at the end of the game when everybody goes and bumps the goalie, they give them a little bonk on the head. Now, when you're doing that, what are you, 3 inches from their face, and you're saying "good game"? So you're spewing all sorts of stuff, out of your mouth. Now that's a little gross, but that's my concern. Like and again, let me preface this by saying I was talking to an NHL general manager, and I was telling him that I had plans to go to watch some NFL games. Right now I'm unemployed for the first time since I was probably 12 years old. And I've got a little more freedom. And I had said, I had all these plans. I was going to watch some NFL in my home city here. And I've gone to games. I've had tickets for years, but because of my job, I'd only gotten a couple or 3. And, prior to this pandemic, I was thinking, well, I'll be able to go to every Detroit Lions home game. But I said to my wife the other day, we'll probably go to 0 Lions home games, even if they play 50,000. 58,000, whatever it holds there at Ford Field. I don't want to be, sitting next to it. And the general manager said to me, and he laughed. He goes, "Hey, you got to live your life." And yeah, I do. And there's certain that's a reality that we all have to face because we've talked about this before, acceptable risk. But I don't think it's there yet for me. And that would be my only point. Is I don't think. This is still too fresh. There's still too much of it going on. Like I'm optimistic. Like I see what's happening in New York, and boy, social distancing and sheltering in place has really had an impact. Like I think this could have been far worse if we would have, tucked into our homes and stop venturing out. So I've seen the success, and I'm encouraged by that we're going to do that. But there's still too much of it out there to make me comfortable with the idea, and that's why I'm nervous about them playing. And I find it fascinating that it's also come out that they're going to be in certain cities. Thus far, all we know for sure is Atlanta, where they're going to open NBA arenas for players to come in and work out by themselves, not in a group effort, but come in and use the weight equipment or whatever they want to use. Mm-hmm. But there's still, and they've been clear about this, no plan to play. Now everyone assumes that the original plan of perhaps going to Vegas that'll eventually happen, but they seem a little bit more wary of it than the NHL at this point. I don't know if that's accurate assessment or not, but there's less about them playing than we hear about the NHL playing.
And that's the part I just don't. I can't wrap my head around where with that Dr. Fauci that everybody seems to respect so much has come out and clearly admits that there's probably going to be a rebound of the virus in the fall. So I just don't. Yeah, and to have players, and then the comments that if they're tested positive, they continue to play. I don't get it. Listen, I'm the same as you. I hope it happens, but I just don't see how it happens safely. But
I think if I would guess, they'll just remove that player, and that player will have to be quarantined, and they'll hope that he hadn't infected anyone, and they'll just keep testing every day.
But going back to the history of it, and I hear all this tracking and tracing, and
right.
So somebody comes down with it now. They're starting. Former mayor of New York City, Mayor Bloomberg, has been tasked to go out and develop this system where they can now trace people that person who has been now diagnosed with a positive test. They trace all the people that he was in touch with, and then they have to quarantine them. So wouldn't you quarantine the whole team then if one player gets tested?
Well, that's what we were doing early on, but maybe
Yeah.
they feel more comfortable in that. I think if you were living in a normal environment, but do you factor in? Do you factor in that these are some of the healthiest people on the planet?
Right.
That
No, you don't, because I think the thought was coming into it that it would just affect the elderly and everything, which that has been a lot of, like, in nursing homes and everything.
Right.
But there's still been young, healthy people that have died from this too. So
Yeah.
I don't think you can.
Well, but that opens the door too. Like, are we still going to have broadcasters? Because a lot of the broadcasters around the league are older.
Right.
Are we?
Well, here's what we can do though. And I did this. Remember, I worked the rush of the KHL.
Right.
So I worked for a station years ago where they had the rights to the KHL, which the feed would come over, and they'd have the Russian broadcasters. Obviously, they would take the voices out, and we would sit in a booth by ourselves, and we would do the play-by-play and the color commentating in a booth watching the game. I guess they could do that.
Yeah. Well, and you've got all sorts of issues there. I mean, the for the older people over 70, the difficulty factor rises. In other words, 60 to 70 is worse than for a 20-year-old, but 70 and over, that's when you really start to see a lot of problems. Now we have multiple general managers over 70. David Poyle, I think, is over 70. Lou Lamoriello, Jimmy Rutherford 70?
Sure. Yeah, it must be.
Yeah. So, we have a lot of those. Will those guys then just sort of stay away from the dressing room, or will they watch from home, or what will happen with those people? So, I guess there are all sorts of factors that to use in making your decisions. But whatever happens, it's still risky. And I think we're going to get the other issue too. Let's talk about this too. So like, it seems to me that a dressing room is a giant petri dish.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just can't, given the sweat and so forth that goes on in the sports world, and you come in there and you pull off your gear, and your gear gets thrown on the floor or on the cubicle. It's just a breeding ground for bacteria and germs. So you got, one of those issues. Well, compare that to, if you wanted to kind of discuss how this spreads, I have followed Chris Cuomo, the CNN anchor. He was came down with the virus, and it got a pretty good grip on him. He had fevers for 7 or 8 days. He still worked, but you could tell there was a high misery index. Well, he was living in his family's basement.
Yep.
He never came out. Stayed down there. They put his meals at the top, and he came up and just got the meals and shut the door and went back down. And that's how he rode out this virus. Well, subsequent to him coming out of this, now we learn that his son, his 14-year-old son, and his wife both contracted the disease.
I agree.
So if it can be transmitted in that environment, what's it going to be like in a dressing room?
Oh, I know. I had friends of mine too that from my gym, gentleman, really great gentleman, and he and his whole family got it too. So it spread throughout the whole family. Hey, I got to get a quick little comment up here. This guy, this Kevin Porter. You guys need to follow Kevin. He's a firefighter up in the Toronto area, and he writes in talking about how tough it is with firefighters. But he's a very interesting case. And I'm getting off topic here a little, but I can't remember how old he is, but he still is living out his dream to try to make it to pro hockey. And he's continuing he keeps his job, great guy, but he's got some great conditioning videos showing himself working out all the time. But he's just kind of echoing our statement here, but everybody should watch him.
Well, I mean, that he raises an important question. Are they even going to ask players to social distance? I don't think they will. I think they're going to view it as, I'm sheltering in place with my wife,
Yeah.
Like, we don't stay 6 feet apart in our home.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way they're going to view it is, we're living in this biosphere, the safe zone, this bubble that we've created at this hotel. Nobody's leaving the bubble.
Yep.
And everything's being done in the bubble. So we're all in it together. And that's why they're hoping nobody will test positive, is because, they're assuming and hoping that no one will leave the bubble.
But that's the thing, though, with the bubble. Once one guy does get infected, aren't they?
No, that's right. Well, and what's the odds we're going to get everyone staying in a bubble? I've had people have written to me after I've talked about this and said that they think that it'll be there's just too many support personnel that are needed to put on a hockey game, that something's going to give. Like, in an arena, you're going to need a little electrician. You're going to need the people in case the boards, we have an issue with them, and fixing the plexiglass. You're going to have all the off-ice officials that do all the statistics. And, I've asked people around the league, and they make a real valid point. Like, an arena is so big, we can socially distance those people pretty good. They won't ever have to see each other. Yeah. And, maybe that's true. But do those people all go home to see their families where they're now creating that? Or are they part of the bubble too?
Oh, they have to be part of the bubble.
How many people are we putting in this bubble?
Exactly. That's what I keep thinking. That bubble is going to be. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of chuckling about it, but it's all serious stuff. And I want to repeat this because I don't want anyone to think that I don't think the NHL and the Players Association aren't giving this serious thought, because I do. I mean, and you and I both, I've covered the league for 35 years. I know these people, they're spending hours upon hours talking about what works. And, they have a lot of issues. Like, this is a $5 billion business. Yeah. This is an important aspect in the economy. These are people, we tend to think of the sports world as $1 million athletes, but it's all those people underneath that make their living out of it. It's agents, and you've pointed out it's minor league players who are still trying to get to the NHL. It's all the arena workers that are required to put on, a hockey game. It's, all the people who sell jerseys. A lot of people make their living. It's funny. I did a book with Jeremy Roenick, and he once told me that he will sign multiple items for people, and some of his teammates would give him a hard time saying, they're just going to sell those. Yeah. And Jeremy Roenick said, great. He said, that's awesome. And he goes, well, he said, but they're getting something for nothing. And he goes, more power to them. He said, they're out here standing, waiting for me to come out. And he goes, if I can help them make a living, with all the money that I make, great.
Key there, right? He's making enough money that he doesn't need.
Right. Like, that's exactly his point. He said, I was making a ton of money, and what are these guys making here? He says, I don't really know, but if you're a memorabilia dealer and you stand out and you collect athletes' autographs, and if you can get $30 out of me stopping and spending 15 seconds, he said, I'm thrilled by that. He says, I'm helping the economy. Just pushing it. Well, the trickle down on that. We don't even think about that. It's the guys who sell boxes of hockey cards, and
absolutely,
guys who
all the restaurants. Like, you think down about, they're all close in Madison Square, around Madison Square Garden, but I think of all the places, like when a Ranger game is on, those places are all packed before and after games, and that's not going on now. So
right. Well, and so the point of all that is, it's real easy for me and you to get up here and say, well, it makes us nervous. But there's a lot to be considered, for the league. And, our president has said, and he was, I think, accurate in one of the few times, but that's an editorial comment.
I was going to say, you're giving the president credit for
but he said we need sports, and we do. Yeah, we need it because it's a big boost to the economy. But we also need it because it's a distraction for what's going on. It's an escape. It's entertainment. We need it for all those rules and reasons. And, I think that I understand completely why the NHL is trying to figure out.
It kind of goes where I want to go here, and you did a great job of segueing there, Mr. Kevin Allen. But like watching the NFL draft this weekend, apparently there's 55 million people watched that over the 3 days. And I'm thinking to myself, like we had the conversation before about the NHL having the draft before they start the season. I just think they've got to do it. I think it's an opportunity. Once I see, how the NFL did it, and to be honest with you, I didn't even think the NFL draft was that exciting because like the excitement of the player getting selected and then jumping up and down, it just didn't seem to happen that way. Whether it's because of delay or whatever, the players just didn't. That wasn't going on. They're in their homes. But I just think that if that show again wasn't that exciting, but still all the diehard sportsmen like myself, who's not necessarily a guy that would normally watch the NFL draft. I'll watch NFL games, but I'm not going to watch the draft. But I watched it because there's nothing else. I was actually looking forward to watching it. So I think the NHL should definitely do the draft before the season starts. I know there's a lot of complications and a lot of things you got to go through, but I just think they're missing an opportunity if they don't do the draft early.
Well, I talked about that NFL draft before it was on, and I told you that I was going to revert to being a 10-year-old again. And I did. I watched it gavel to gavel, and I watched the whole thing, and I thought they did a tremendous job given the circumstances for that. And they did it in some respects in a lighthearted way. They didn't take themselves too seriously. The joking about the commissioner sitting down doing his fireside chats and that thing. I mean, they did, and the fact that he interacted with the fans
they raised a ton of money for it too, right?
I thought they did a really nice job, and they had all the video. I remarked to my son-in-law that. Like the fact that they went and dug up high school video of some of these guys, it was fun. Like I enjoyed the high school stuff more than the college stuff. Now, saying all that, and I did a little homework on this, and we couldn't do anything like that because of the name recognition and the understanding of where these players come from. So we would have to do a much more scaled down.
Why?
I've just checked that, the ratings on the NFL draft in general are not very good. Right. So would they be better? Probably, because as you said, we don't have many options. But the most people that I talked to about this thought that it wouldn't be necessarily the home run that that it was for the NFL. They just don't think people
it's not as popular as football. I mean, as far as numbers.
Well, exactly. They just don't think it'll be as popular. That's not saying they're not going to do it because it'll be better than nothing, is what some people said.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be more popular than the current draft for the NHL.
But it's going to be hard because and I've said this. I got into a huge debate when I did another podcast about this when I was opposed to it, and this is what I point out: when you do the NFL draft. You don't even really have to be a total NFL fan geek. You can be a college fan, for example, and want to see where the guys are coming in. And sometimes you're just, you've gone to college, so you want to see who's players from your school are going to get picked, or players from the SEC. How many of them are going to get picked? That kind of thing. So, and we're just not going to have that because when we explain that so-and-so got 3 goals for Sarnia against Erie. That's not going to resonate.
Yeah, but you know what, though? I think what the NFL does, too, is they tell the guys life stories. Okay, so if nobody's interested...
you told me that, and I counted them. How many life stories do you think they did in the first round?
Well, they didn't have to do as many. But my point is they didn't have to in football because of all the reasons you just said. So in hockey, be creative. People don't care about the fact they played the Sarnia. Then talk about something else about the young man.
Well, you can, but not everybody has an interesting life, Tom. I mean, I'm for it. I'm just saying I want to lower the expectations. Like I've had people write in and say, "Oh, this is going to be unbelievable." I'm not sure that it will be, but I think it'll be fun for the hockey fans.
I don't think the NFL draft was unbelievable. I think they did the best.
55 million people watched it.
I think they did the best they could with what they had, but no, there's nothing else to watch.
55 million people watched that.
Nothing else to watch.
It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable.
But I watched it. It was bored. I was bored watching it, but I still watched it because there's nothing else to watch.
What a great endorsement for putting NHL on. It was so boring, but let's put the NHL on at least.
But that's my point with the NHL draft. It's going to be the same thing. It's like, would you normally want to watch the NHL?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't even want to watch the NHL draft that much. But
so now you've totally lost me. So you say the NFL was boring. So why are we putting it on then?
Because 55 million viewers watched it and it was boring. So the NHL draft could be boring, and they're still going to get more than.
How many people do you think will watch it?
I have no idea what the normal NHL draft is.
Yeah, I don't either, actually.
I mean, it's during the summer. They held the draft. I don't know. Is it a couple of million, maybe?
Yeah, that's what I would guess too, but I don't know.
But that's my point. So, okay, I'm assuming there's a lot of people in the same place that I was. I wasn't that exciting to watch. There was nothing else on, so I found myself sitting there saying, okay, this is kind of boring, but what else am I going to do? I watched every movie on the planet so far. So it's the same thing with the National Hockey League. Normally, people would not watch the NHL draft. There's nothing else on. It's NHL. They're going to have some fun stuff. It's for charity. Have a charity component. Do it like the NFL did. Do your best. Be creative. Just don't. You're right. You bring a good point. You don't want to talk about the guy playing the Sarnia or Moose Jaw or whatever. Some guy in Florida really won't care that some kid played in Moose Jaw. But have something finding interesting things about them. There's always interesting ways you can go back and look at old stats. Talk about how many guys were never drafted and played in the National Hockey League. Talk about the Marty St. Louis and the Ed Belfours and those kinds of. There's all different kinds of things you can do surrounding the draft to draw interest, other than just concentrating on that guy getting drafted. He's drafted. He's a third-round draft pick. He's drafted. Let's move on. What's the next story here? I just think, and the NHL's done a fantastic job at that. So.
Well, I'm not opposed to doing it. I think there are some reasons not to do it, just because of the one thing that does make the draft interesting is the fact that we usually have a couple or three major trades around it, and we won't be able to do that.
Very true.
We're going to have we're going to have to change the rules. Already in Detroit, they're all excited because they're going to change the rules, and so the Red Wings will have a much better chance of getting the number one pick. And of course, in the other cities, they're going, why do we have rules if we're going to do those? So,
because with the coronavirus, that's why we have rules.
That's some people say exactly that, Tom. But there are other people who are saying, why do we have to change the rules when we can just go in September? When the season is over. So
because we're going to go back to back at seasons. So I just think of the timing, and I just think of the opportunity.
Well,
here there's right now nothing else is on, nothing else to watch. I watched NASCAR the other day, for God's sakes. Yeah, no, I never watched NASCAR.
I'm still watching the PBA, so I have no leg to stand on. I mean, it's ridiculous that I'm watching that. In fact, my wife actually said to me yesterday, she goes, you've got that PBA tape. You should just watch that, because she wants it off our DVR. You should just watch that PBA that you. I'm arguing really for the sake of argument. I don't like that they're changing the rules. I think there is some unfairness to the fact that all of a sudden now the Detroit Red Wings, who had an 18% chance, now can, instead of falling all the way to 4, can now only fall to 2. So what that means is that someone else, other teams are not being, and we're doing it simply for PR. Is the reason we're doing it. There's no other reason to do it other than for PR. So I'm not sure that I agree with that in principle. Saying that, if they want to try it, if they think that it's out of sight, sports is entertainment.
Yeah, totally.
And if you're convinced that it's going to make that big of an impact, I
think the NHL has been, not maybe the leader. Yeah, I think over the last few years, kind of leading the way with all these interesting things they've done. The outdoor games, they've now got this puck that they can track. They're trying to be creative with all things. Why not continue that trend?
Yeah.
Find some other way. Okay, the draft has got to happen at some point. This is a great opportunity for the league. Let's find some way to make this a special event, something different, right? They've been fantastic with that stuff.
Well, they're trying to. You can tell. That NBC would be open-minded about it, because they've had reruns of past Stanley Cups on NBC, not NBC SN, but on the primary NBC channel. So, maybe they would do that. And
Yeah, totally.
look, I understand why. I'm a little bit fearful that it could end up being embarrassing if nobody watches it. But
Worst case scenario, if not that many people watch it, what have you lost though?
Well, you've changed the rules for, and maybe that doesn't matter to people, but that's a pretty significant deal for these people.
But we're doing a lot of different things, right? We're going to try to play back-to-back seasons. We're going to try to squeeze in the remainder of this season, then the playoffs, and then start another season.
We have to, but we're doing that because we have to. We don't have to change the draft.
They don't have to.
Yes,
they could just not finish the regular season. They could just go right in the playoffs.
Well, I mean, I think there are reasons that force them to kind of do that, to try to
PR, right?
It's financial.
Yeah, TV dollars and everything. So it's the same thing.
With $500 million, and there's no TV dollars available for running the draft early.
But it's promotion, though. If you can find a way, it's the same thing with the All-Star Game. The All-Star Game now is an opportunity to bring in corporate sponsors and everything. It's really, the All-Star Game isn't that important. They make it into an event more so that they have all these other things around.
I'm not even sure what that argument means. So what does the All-Star Game have to do with that?
Well, it's the same kind of thing. It's an opportunity to help promote your game, right? Nothing else is on right now.
Well, but the All-Star Game exists because it's so big in the cities that it's in.
Right.
And it's corporate sponsorship. You don't get corporate sponsorship for the draft.
Yeah, but it's more of an opportunity. I just view the draft. You've got an opportunity here, an event, a live hockey event.
Yeah.
To do something with it. And now you're going to push it back to when everything else is going on. Now, if everything else opens up in September or wherever else it is, and now you're competing against all these other things, you're trying to squeeze a draft in between two seasons. Yeah. Why not do it right now?
Well, I think that point, I see that point as you're trying to do and create some promotion at a time when there's nothing going on. I do understand that point. My argument is simply I don't like changing the rules. And I think it really gives some teams an advantage. I just don't know why we need to do it. And we're going to have to sort of be disruptive of how we kind of draft in order to accommodate that in terms of.
No, the GMs are actually going to have to use their brains in a different way and do something different. Oh my God. Are they going to be okay?
Yeah, I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is the fact that, we're not going to be able to, we're going to have to determine the draft order, not based on what actually happened, but what happened, 3/4 of the way or 4/5 of the way through the season.
Because we've been,
it doesn't change anything.
We have a deadly pandemic that has shut down our league and our economies and everything. So yes, it will be different.
You keep missing that point. We're not forced into doing this by the pandemic. We're doing it because
you're forced into it because it's the right thing to do, because it's an opportunity for the league. Everybody will survive the fact that it's different. Then we'll go back to the old.
Sure. Well, everything will survive the pandemic too, but that doesn't.
No, not everybody survives the pandemic. But listen, it's different. There's no question. But doing something different isn't necessarily wrong.
Well, I agree with that. I agree with that.
It's a great opportunity for the league, I think.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, because I think they're going to do it. So we'll see how it goes, and maybe it'll be a wonderful thing. And is it going to hurt? No.
Yeah, exactly.
I get that. I just don't understand why we can't just do it in September. But your argument is that it's a promotion that you think they need. Totally. So, and I accept the argument. I just think I would prefer to just.
I know what's happened here. You called Barry Trotz, and he doesn't want to have the draft beforehand. That's why.
I haven't spoken to Barry Trotz, but I'm guessing that in fact, I know the league is, split on this, obviously. So a lot of people don't want to deal with it, but that doesn't color my thinking. I just don't like changing the rules when we don't really need to. And I don't like giving one team an advantage when it's really kind of unnecessary. So, but that's, I get it for promotion. But man, boy, did we eat this time up.
Yeah. This argument was good. We like this.
Yeah. All right. Well, please make sure you catch us later in the week, where we probably will not be arguing about this anymore.
Oh, yeah. I'll make sure we do. We'll see you on Wednesday, guys.
See you later. Bye-bye.